With our Source Kabala collective mind, we're going to be investigating today sacrifice. Okay, let me start in the English and switch us over to Hebrew pretty quickly, because many of us might be able to feel that sacrifice feels like a reduction of something that we have. It feels like a taking away or giving away, but giving away with a sense of victimhood. And like now, when we're being asked to sacrifice something for the sake of curbing the pandemic, a lot of our leaders are saying, I know it's a sacrifice, but I think that that languaging is accurate to how people feel. It's not accurate to how I feel personally. I feel ready to contribute to the collective, and I imagine there are others who do as well. But there is a feeling of this taking away and reduction. And sacrifice is not Hebrew, nor is it the translation of the Hebrew word. And this fascinated me when I was going through Torah, and there's a whole chunk, like you saw, I have, quite a bit of verses on the packet today, and there's lots more of these native Hebrews, this wandering tribe, and how did they relate to their God in a very vulnerable circumstance. So now we're building the context a little bit. And so why it became really important to me to look at the root letters here, which we're going to do together today, is because the notion of sacrifice has this depletion feeling in English, as it's used commonly. And in addition, the temple was destroyed. It still is destroyed. We cannot offer our sacrifices. Woe are us. Now, where am I getting that little character from? The art scroll Sidor, over and over and over. And the art scroll, and Saba, I definitely want you to pipe in when I'm creating this context if you know anything to add or different than what I'm saying, because I think Bert has probably related to these art scroll Sidors over his life, at least as much as I have when I wanted to really look at them deeply. So these are our Orthodox Sidurim, our Orthodox prayer books. And even if we're not practicing Orthodoxy, they have a lot of power. I think even we would refer to them. When I start creating a baby naming, when I do more creative ceremonies, I'm still going to look at the art scroll, right? That's a reference point. It's become a pillar of how we understand prayer in Judaism. And what I saw was, woe is me, the temple's destroyed, we can't do our rituals. Woe is me, the temple's destroyed, we can't do our rituals. So much. And even, I believe it's the morning blessings, and like I said, there's someone here who might be able to correct me. When I was looking at the morning ones, which are so beautiful in so many ways, they say, may these words be as if we made the sacrifices in the temple. And then they go on to pull out these psukim from Torah to remember. Just remember what we used to do. Now, mind you, there's a lot of blood in these things. One might even want to ask some of those live human beings who are saying these words over and over, would you really want to be doing that? Is that, really up your alley? But what is up everyone's alley is the temple. And right now we have a temple mount filled with bloodshed, and not all ritual. We have a temple mount that is a battleground. So for me, I had to look at, what are we holding on to? What is so important? Where is it? What does this mean to people? And I saw it was very strong and very deep. However, when I started reading Vayikra, Leviticus, which we'll look at today, the root of sacrifice, Koof, Oh, I forgot the flashcards again, but it's on here. Koof-resh-bet. The root of sacrifice means drawing close. Now see, I already well up with tears when I say this again. Because you paint the whole picture of this longing for what isn't and longing for what's been taken from us, and woe is us, we can't do our sacrifices, so we'll say all these words in place of it. But the root means drawing close. So why are we drawing ourselves away? Why are we putting the temple out of reach? Now, I don't mean that this is active in the mind of synagogue goers right now. I don't know. I can't speak for all of them. But I do mean that when I took the Siddur and I said to my rabbi mentor, okay, I'm here with you. Where did this thing come from? You know, pages and pages of what thou shalt do to pray. Where did it come from? Because it didn't come from the native Hebrews. And he helped me. Steinsaltz wrote a big 2-volume book, it's 2 volumes, I guess, books, on the origins of the Siddur. And I went and looked up all the prayers I possibly could and read where they came from, as far as we know. And guess what? Largely, we don't know. Largely, we don't even know where they came from, but they are the way that leads a person like me to be questioning. But again, why I keep referring to this is there's an opposition happening that I felt the conflict of. There is over and over again repeated, woe are us because we can't do our temple rituals. But what they are ways of drawing close. And what I want to say to all of those creating these prayers, you can still draw close. That's up to you. If you lose your temple, if you lose your para aduma, red heifer, if you lose your mizbeach, if you lose the blood of any, you can still draw close. Because that's what it says if you read Torah. So here again we are at Source Kabala. All I'm doing is going to the source of the word. Krav, Koof-resh-bet, to draw close. And nobody disputes my understanding of the translation. There are just different ways of thinking about how that's applicable to us today. And of course, we're going to look first at how I think about it and see how you all think about it as well. Unmute and go right ahead.
Thank you. I don't know what the word is in Greek, but in Latin, sacrifice is clearly 2 words from the Latin, to make sacred. So looking at the action, it was that helped people feel the sacredness. Is a sacrifice in the sense of making the place sacred, making the people sacred, making the moment, or revealing the sacredness of the moment. But then when it went through the linguistic sieve into the German or the Finnish and then the English, it became exactly as you said. But I am inspired to look at the Greek. But I love the drawing close, because if one doesn't know a lot of Hebrew, if one doesn't even know any Hebrew, doesn't even know about Judaism, but one draws close through being present with the clouds or a bird singing, kadosh, right?
Yes, and I appreciate you bringing, maybe looking at the Greek and the English. I do think that the English in its etymology represents the word pretty well, but not in its actual usage, how we tend to feel when we say that word as a tendency. For those who are exploring words more deeply, you might be able to feel the sacred in it. But the other interesting thing, because I was studying in Israel, and this is fascinating to go around hearing how people use modern Hebrew, which was very intentionally developed from biblical Hebrew as a leap. It didn't just evolve into modern. There was a leap of intentionality to create a modern language. So you go around Israel and they use the word korban, which is translated as the sacrifice in ancient temple times, to be colloquial for victim. The korban of an attack. The korbanim from this last bus attack. Even the more, somebody unmuted and we're getting a lot of background. Even the more, thank you. Even the more mental and emotional victim, you know, she's been a victim of her own, depression or something. Somebody would use the word korban. So I kept hearing this and the expression of the victim, but hearing inside of it, karov, drawing close. And so it became important to me to really deepen into looking at this. And if we don't just long for this slaughtering and blood sprinkling that we used to do, what else could we do? This became my question. And you mentioned that, Rahman, in what you shared, you know, being present with the birds or the sound of, I don't remember if you said sound of water, but that's what I'm saying, remembering you saying it. What else could we do instead of grieving, which has been going on for Second Temple, was it 586? Second Temple just, oh no, that's the BC, 70. 70 is the CE, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So, okay, it's still, you know, over 1,000 years of grieving and some war making in our minds or in physical too. So what could we do was my question. If I look into these roots, it does feel sacred when we read about the temple sacrifices, the korbanim, and the rituals, ketoret, eish, incense, fire, water, where you can stand, who goes in, who doesn't. And by the way, a lot of silence, not a siddur, right? That's what drew me personally. I know some people love to have a long siddur to read out of, and I don't criticize it as a way, but it wasn't feeling like my way. So when I go and look at it, does feel so important. I agree with all of you who are grieving that something feels important. And I agree when I read the word korban, lehakriv, drawing close. Yes, drawing close. Okay, drawing close inside community, drawing close to our divinity, drawing close to God as a character or as a direct experience. Either way, yes, I agree. But what can we do? So all I had to do was look no further than the source. Because then the first korban they talk about is the oleh. The first korban is the oleh, which they translate as the burnt offering. And I'm like, where's the burnt and where's the offering? Oleh is go up, rise up. So then if I, again, unmitigated, unfiltered, just take the oleh, I think of my paltry, is that a word, paltry? Paltry little drawing here. But my body goes to this, right? So an embodied ritual where you take an animal and everyone's quiet and it's so much awe and there's blood and there's sprinkling and there's throwing and there's probably crying and tying and embodied, not my way, but embodied. And then oleh. or the olah. I'm not remembering the vowel right now, but it's called the olah or the olah, but either one means up. And then you get to, I mean, this was like amazing when I just read it. I just read it to see, how do I closen in here? What does this mean to me? And then I see the second one is called the mincha. Laniach is to place gently down into a comfortable position. And why do I say all those words? It's because it can refer to comfort. Laniach, noach. Noach, who's translated as noah, is that root of restful. Could, I guess, yeah, restful. But also in modern Hebrew, if somebody just says to you, could you laniach your telephone, it would be place it down. It can be used as casually as that, but it is down. So there we had the second direction right there. I mean, I felt like, what are you guys doing all this commentary for? It's just there in the Hebrew. So ole and the laniach, which feels like prostration. Now, Jews pride themselves right now, this will just be a small footnote to not divert too much, but pride themselves on not prostrating. That's become a Jewish pride, except Yom Kippur and except in remembrance of the high priests. Longer story. But if we just go back to our native Hebrew roots, prostration was not uncommon, nor was it thought of badly. As I said in our lesson, I think number 1, in the Torah, people are falling on their face all over the place. Vayipol ala pav arza is, I mean, I giggle because I remember seeing it like so many times. And I'm like, I know this. Like Rahmana said, when you hear the most delightful song of a bird and you're really present with it, one could feel like prostrating, like being deeply, like lowering ourselves into rest in front of something awesome, in the presence of anything awesome. And it's right there in the text, in the Hebrew words themselves. So I began to create a morning practice based in these things that we're exploring right now, an actual physical practice. I even taught it in Sfat, which is one of the old cities in Israel, to Orthodox women who are very open, obviously. I've befriended a bunch of them there, and they're very open to what I bring, uniquely open. But we did this morning practice as a workshop. And I also created a ceremony out of exactly what we're studying now, that I directed at a gathering of about 500 Palestinian, Jewish, and American women called the Ohel Nashim, the women's tent, that some of you might know, Dorit Bat Shalom was at the time spearheading these remarkable gatherings of women from all the cultures, and especially the cultures typically in conflict. So I did get to, very soon after I received the information about this ritual, from the higher ups, that's how I experienced, I was able to do it with these 500 women. I had a broken leg at the time, so the few pictures show me sitting on a chair. I couldn't even be moving in a movement ritual. But it was pretty incredible to have just gotten it in the land of Israel and been invited to do this ritual with the women. Because here's the third thing. So we had the first korban is an olah. Olah, I'm pretty sure it's olah. Go back and look. The second is the mincha. Give up, offer down. Give up, offer down is, again, my receiving. This is not fact, but the fact is that these are referring to directions. And then the third one in the text, shalem, shlamim, the zevach shlamim. And I drew it as a big circle with a whole bot, like that. What is that famous graphic with the balanced, looks mostly like a man usually, but the human being with the arms out and the arms down. that was my image, was this shlamim, which means wholeness or peace, but both. And those are the three that they give us in order, recollected. So offer up, give down, and then this wholeness. Is quite remarkable to me. It's quite striking. And the mincha gets, I put it on your graphic here, the mincha offering gets translated as grain. So I wrote grain. Not that it wasn't, there is detail, but the title is clearly not grain. And the ola, burnt. So when they do go on to describe, obviously there's fire involved in the animal sacrifices, and there were grains being brought. So I'm not saying it didn't happen, but if you look at the title of the word, what I am saying, I'm not trying to say something probably meant something different then. All I'm trying to do with this one is bring it forward to now in a way that we can. Because what I kept reading in the prayer book was, oh, we can't, oh, we can't, oh, we can't. So I felt a call to bring it forward in a way that we can. And when I read it, it just jumped out of these directions. Up, down, and then I say it, the shlamim, as all around. Up, down, all around. Any comments so far on seeing directions as the titles of these offerings?
I know I'm a little slow to the call, but can I comment at least on what I did receive like 20 minutes ago? I realized it's all, I won't say it's all one, but it's happening now. I received that when you said sacrifice and you were going into your experience or definition of what that would means for you. I just received loud and clear that it was becoming sufficiently sacred. And so for me, that means learning someone, or learning communication and connectivity with someone. You're when you're learning someone, you don't, well, what is sacred enough? And obviously the blessing of us having numerous fellows is that we learn ourselves more so in that. But I believe for me, in the experience of it, is, am I sacred enough? I almost don't have a right to say that. But I will say it because I received it. So for people who don't know if their vessel is sacred enough, I think they do have to go through the ladder to receive. Only for themselves. You know, like someone went ahead of them, you know, like Moses or Noach or whoever, and created manually this little ritual that they can do. Although you mentioned Leviticus, and it is said by the sages that there will be a day when the one that gives the 3 houses will be the gift of a million houses, meaning there's no end to that closeness that you speak of. So that day will come, apparently, according to Leviticus. Sure, it might be the Zohar, but it's in the same book. Yeah.
Thank you.
Karen?
Yes.
In the drawing, Is that an aleph before the nun and the chet and then the hey? And
I messed up, and I didn't want to try to fix it because it would have gotten more abstract. I wrote the mem in cursive instead of block. So it's a mem if you
oh,
can
ma'am,
just change
thank
it.
you.
Yeah. I figured if and who has white out anymore on their desks? So I figured if I scribbled it, it would just look worse.
Well, what I do is I take those things of address labels that I get sent every, a lot of them are for Tomas, who doesn't need them. I just keep the white part and then I cut a little bit and stick it on. It works really well.
I want to say again, since you said his name, I really love his name coming up in our lessons.
Yeah, me too. So muncha,
Mincha, yeah, mincha. And the reason I made the nun and the chet very big, if that's not obvious, is because that's the root. It's a 2-letter root in this case.
Thank you.
I also, oh yeah, that's enough on that. Any other comments thus far? Because I want to get into some of the text, but I'm happy to take some comments of thoughts because I said a lot already.
Well, I just want to say in my morning practice, I'm doing the up and I'm doing the down and I'm doing the circling and coming into the center. So it's organic.
Yes, organic. I mean, obviously part of why I saw these directions as body movements is because of my embodiment practice. You know, not everyone might, and just like you. But because of my embodiment practice, I also have an analytical way to say, these are very primal motions to a body in many cultures, right? The yogic really made, lots of branches of embodiment practices, but there are others, and our brothers, the Islamic, are still falling on their face all over the place. We just stopped. And for me, it's a shame. I like it, but it's because I have an experience of it. So again, none of this would be to say to someone, you're doing it wrong. Not at all. It's just to say, well, because of this experience, I'm able to glean this and share it if someone appreciates it. That's why I'm not making this class to do the practice together, but I think there is also enough, and we could, but I think there's also enough analytical interest for any, if I could talk to any of those art scroll editors, I would, because I like talking to people. Just getting, pulling on their ear is really hard in my life so far, but I would talk to them and say, isn't there another way for that nostalgia, for that love of the temple and its rituals to be contextualized for Jewish people today? Isn't there another way than something that's griefful and often warful, of warfare? I can't say everybody is into that, but certainly the grief is quite remarkable. Quite, every Shabbat, the blessing of the Kiddush. I'm remembering this, but I'm thinking that we rebuild the temple. Is that right? Am I right? They're all over the place. They're certainly all over Passover. Kiddush, yeah, right. So it's like all the time we keep talking about this thing that we wish would exist. And for me, it became, this is also my experience in the healing arts, which all that means is helping people recover from hard times, right? So one wouldn't advise even their best friend. Okay, let's take it down, because this is also be on video for other people. So let's take it down to, you have a best friend who's been through a breakup or a divorce. And how long do you hold that person while they cry? Isn't there some wisdom, to bring to recovering, not right? So, and we know that in psychology, grief has its cycles, and and one is allowed to cycle for sure, but there is an outlet, and I'm not seeing the outlet in the prayer book text, and that was my concern. That I'm sure from a lot of what Reb Zalman said, he shared very similar concerns about. again, only because of the health of the people, not because it's wrong. But if I were to ask any of these editors, is that what you want to be doing with the memory of the rituals in the temple? I'm not sure they would even themselves say yes. I think there could be, and I know for all these Orthodox in Tzfat, they loved my stuff, but as I admitted, they like me and they're very open-minded. But even a man there, David Friedman, who some of you might know, he's a pretty famous artist from Tzfat, and he had been black hat for a long time and then took the black hat off, but stays in a big chunk of Orthodoxy. I don't know how he would describe it, but he's still a hardcore Orthodox practitioner, but he opened his mind more, and he always heard my stuff. I think he was in my workshop for this movement ritual. So, some people would be open to hear it. Okay, let's go back to the text, please, and thank you. So I'm on page 1 of what I sent you, but for those who don't have, I didn't write at the top. This is I didn't write it. This is chapter 40 of Exodus. It's right before we start Leviticus. This is fascinating. Remember we talked about things being next to each other in Torah cannot be too accidental in our last class. So this is the end of Exodus before we get into Leviticus. When they went to the tent of meeting and they came near to the altar, they washed. I'm looking at the Hebrew and saying what comes to me spontaneously right now. But came near, that's why I put it in here. It says they came near. It doesn't say they made sacrifices, right? Same root. They came near. Uvkravtam. Just as Adonai had enjoined to Moses. I use the word enjoined instead of commanded, and we could do another lesson on why. But for right now, enjoined. Okay, so he brought up the whole court around the tabernacle, the Mishkan, the tent of meeting, and to the altar, and set up a screen at the gate. Moses finished his work. A cloud covered the tent of meeting, which we know as the tent of witnessing, because we already went through that, just to be succinct. A cloud covered the tent of meeting, and the kvod Adonai, the glory of Adonai, filled this whole tent, this whole sacred place. And Moses was not able to go inside because this cloud was there. Adonai was filling the tent. Kvod Adonai, this glory, this light, this power of Adonai was filling the tent. But when the tent was taken up, ha'alot, so we have a clue here about ola and ola mean going up, because the cloud went up. So all of these are cluing us about the depth of the translation. The Anan would go up, Bnei Yisrael could travel and continue their journeys. The reason I put this in is for those two reasons. One, why I put all these verses in leading up to teaching us about the korbanot was because they're telling us kravtem, Koof-resh-bet, they're already telling us that means they came close. And they're already telling us that going up, because of this anan, this cloud went up, they're already telling us that verb means go up before they start telling us the names of the sacrifices. So there's they're making it clear. The second reason I put it in is we have to remember that we are entering a mystery. There's a cloud with kvod Adonai. Moses can't go in. The people can't travel. The cloud goes up, they can. We have to stay in that context if we're going to read the next text accurately. We cannot just cerebralize. This is what comes to into my mind. Cerebralize might be a word, but you know, like we can't just use our cerebral faculty. That is not enough faculty when you're talking about a cloud of the kavod Adonai. And just before they were talking about the fire that was burning all the time in there of Adonai, and you know, they could only go in and out with this fire, this cloud, that, you know, this is not the normal reality. So if we're starting to look at the sacrifices, we cannot normalize it too much. That's why I put the context there. Okay, now we're getting in right at the beginning of Leviticus chapter 1. Speak to the children of Israel and tell them, Adam ki yakriv mikem korban. Adam, which we already looked at, the earthling, human being, who wants to bring the korban. Here it says offering in my translation. But if we look at just the roots of those words, we could say human being who brings close the closening. If we're just looking at the roots, and this doesn't make sense what I'm saying in English, but I mean to bring out the meaning of these roots that's not there if we change it to offering or just bringing. Because this one's not just bringing lehavi, to make something come. May the word lavo, from the word lavo, lehavi. It's not just that, it's yakriv. He's making something else come close for a korban, a noun, for a closening. And sure, that closening might come from an offering. When I offer Lisa a cone of ice cream, that might make us friends. You know, that might bring us close. Okay, I don't say offering isn't it, but I feel like it's not enough in the English. So we're talking about the first type of offering. Ladonai, min ha-behema, from the beasts, min ha-bakar, from the cattle, or min ha-tzon, from the flock. Takriv et karban cham. Karban cham, my highlighter's putting the vowels out for me. Takrivu et karban chem. Okay? Bring close your closenings. Now, again, I don't want to be seen as a person that's denying anything in the text. It is true that they are going to bring an object, an animal. And here's where we can have a little fun with the permutations. On the second page, we're going to just jump a little bit, also because of time's sake, where I wrote permutations and I put a Koof-resh-bet. We talked about permutations of two-letter words in the last two classes, which is really easy. Ayin dalet, dayin aleph, dalet ayin, or resh ayin ayin resh. Now we have the three. So if you have a page or any paper to write on, please write a koof. If you don't, you can do it in your head. And then what are the permutations that start with koof? Oh, Noah just showed up. And I didn't lock because I was waiting. Hello, greetings. We will continue, but glad you are here.
Thank you, sorry.
No problem. Happy to see you. I'm now going to lock our meeting. Okay. We're just doing the permutations on page 2. So you're here for the active part. Koof. Okay. Permutation number 1. Where's my pen? So I don't had a pen here. Okay. Koof-resh-bet is the first permutation.
And then resh, koof. Koof.
No, we're starting with koof. We're just doing the koofs for now.
Okay.
The two koofs. So koof-resh-bet, we already established as meaning close.
Mhm.
Then koof-bet-resh would be the other one for koofs, right? We have two possibility. I have to credit, I studied with Ohad Izrahi in Israel, and when he saw me getting so deep, I can't find my pen, so I'll do it in my heart. When he saw me getting so deep into the Source Kabala, the resourcing at the Hebrew, he said, well, then you need to do permutations. So I have to credit him for taking me through this with everything I've explored. Koof-resh-bet is kever, grave. Okay, those are our two koofs. Koof-resh-bet, close. Koof-bet-resh, kever. Bert, you unmuted. Do you have something to say?
Yeah, I was going to say it's a cemetery grave, a burial grave.
Yeah.
Not a situation that's grave.
Thank you. Yes, in fact, it more refers to what you said, burial. It more refers to burial would be the more appropriate because we're talking about digging underneath to put something in. Okay, the resh. Okay, so then if we start with resh, how do we permute? Resh, kuf, bet. Now there's somebody here that has an intimate relationship with resh, kuf, bet. Let's see if she can identify herself. I forgot to look up resh, kuf, bet for in the actual dictionary, but resh, kuf, bet. Oh, sorry.
Rivka is the other, is
The other one. See, I didn't write it down. I'm not good at doing it in my head and I can't find my pen. So you all saw my weakness. Resh-bet kuf, sorry, that's the one. She's down there. Resh-bet kuf, if you add a hey. That's the one I forgot to look up, sorry. And I did forget to look at resh kuf bet. Let's grab it right now. Grab it right now. So Rivka is the other one, and then Rekev or Rakav, I don't know right now, I'm looking it up, but let's go to bet because that relates to the last verse we just did. Bet Koof-resh. Anybody on Boker
Boker, Bakar,
and Bakar?
and Boker.
Yeah, and Boker. Boker, morning.
Boker is morning. Boker is a cowboy in modern Hebrew. It's related to Bakar.
Which is related to Bakar, which we just read is the first offering. It's your cattle.
Okay.
So one of the permutations of Korban, I was walking around all day saying, I know there was one more thing I wanted to do to prepare for class, and I kept looking at my pages. Resh Kuf Bet Rakav. Rikvon Rakav. Nechoshet.
Copper?
That's one of the synonyms here. I'm looking in the concordance, so it's not exactly a dictionary. Yavo Mishle Uverakav Be'atzmotav Mivisha. Okay, I'm going to have to look into this one more. We'll leave it as an unknown because anyway, there's many. So Rakav, and then we had Rivka. Bet Koof-resh, The reason this was so important is because we just read to bring this first offering we're reading about from your behema or your bakar. So it's right there in the permutation. But so otherwise we have boker. Oh, and barak, sorry. The last one with bet. Bet resh kuf. Just as it clear, I'll go over about permutations. So we did permutations with 2-letter words in the first 2 lessons, which just means you change the order of the letters. Now we're doing permutations with a 3-letter root. Okay, so bet Barack Obama, who got his name from the same root.
Thunderclap. It's a thunderclap.
We understand it as lightning, but you're right. I mean, those 2 things are really the same. One's the visual and one's the audio. Because Baram is usually referred to as thunder. But Barak is referred to often. I mean, there was Barak all over Mount Sinai. You know, like this was the presence of Lord in one of the many descriptions. So we have some fascinating things here. I mean, we have the burial, the lightning, morning, like morning, boker, and the bakar, the cattle, and the Kabbalists, of which we are humbly some, would say that all these permutations give us insight into each other's meaning. That's why my graphics are always drawn spiralic, because these meanings are spiraling together. It's not necessarily, right? It's not that cerebralizing that I said, let's be careful of. It's not a linear way of thinking, but it's a way of contemplating. And I actually misspoke. I always think of Barack Obama as this Barak, but it's not. The Hebrew and the Arabic overlap with baraka, bracha, blessing. So I think his was actually probably from the Arabic meaning for a blessing.
Barak is not an unusual masculine name in Hebrew. It's a first name in Hebrew, yeah.
And when it is, I do think it's referring to lightning there. I think when it's an Arabic derivative, it's referring to blessing.
What's fascinating is that our 21 letters, I think, are relative to their 21 languages of their country.
21 languages of their
The
country.
whole language, there's like 21 dialects.
Of which
Anyway,
country?
you don't have to go there
Okay.
someday.
Okay.
Sorry.
I mean, not that
It makes sense to me that way. Sorry.
So let's see what the commentary is on this first offering, based in Ayin Lamed Hey, the name of the first offering. Eitz Chaim Chumash. I wrote down for you where the commentary that I quoted came from. It's considered would you say this is accurate? It's the Reconstructionist publication, right? Abba? The Eitz Chaim Chumash. Oh, you're not remembering. You bought that for me also. It's the Chumash refers to 5 books of Moses with commentary. So this is taken from the Eitz Chaim Chumash. The Olah, which is the first type of sacrifice spoken about, is purely a gift to God with no specific benefit to the donor anticipated, whether brought, typo, out of reverence or guilt. Frequently, the Olah was the first, followed by others, meaning korbanot, which now I'm just saying the Hebrew, korbanot, which is translated as a sacrifice or an offering, but we've already been unpacking that, so I'm saying the korban. Frequently, the olah was the first, followed by others. The offering may have been called olah because flames rose up to heaven. Now, I want to use that last sentence, the offering may be called olah because the flames rose up to heaven, because this is a commentary from somebody who I didn't bother to look up, but who's commenting in this Chumash and is considered a scholar and probably a rabbi both of Torah. And that's maybe, maybe it's olah because it was a burnt offering, they say, and the flames rose up to heaven. My feeling in this Kabbalah is that's not enough. It's not enough to take a fully embodied practice. All of your senses, flame, blood, probably cries of this animal, and just say it was called the olah because, the flames rose up. It's too limited, and that's why our permutations matter. And that's why the translation I want to have is an embodied translation. So we said already, the offer up, this gesture. I'm bringing, my Kabbalah brings gesture to it. And we've already said, just to recap slightly for Noah's sake, but also it can help the cohesion of all we're saying. Why not bring this ancient ritual forward through an embodied sensibility, because it once was embodied? Why limit it to being recalled in word, which it is currently recalled over and over again in word? Why not feel our bodies as this? This is the olah.
It reminds me of the psalm, I lift mine eyes unto the mountains,
Yeah.
from where my help comes. Lifting up.
Yeah. Yes, and that is a different root, just to say it, in case anybody who's watching this later would think, but that's not the same root. But I don't think that matters, because we have different words for lifting things up. But I do think it's very similar. Our gestures of reverence, our gestures of awe exist cross-culturally and cross-religiously when we look. This is pretty factual. Yes.
It also reminds me of our talking about the ayin in the Rosh, the third eye, because from that perspective, what I see with my two eyes gets expanded. Like when Tomas was dying, and I would get up at 4 and spend 4 to 6 in meditation before getting him up. And I'd be grieving that he's going to die. And then I'd get the question, what are you thinking death is? And it was just, well, where's he going to go outside of the Echad? Nowhere else to be but in the Echad.
Where else to go? Where else to be? Okay, on the actually third page of the pages I gave, we're in Leviticus 1:3. Vayikra Aleph Gimel. Im ola karbano min habakar zachar tamim yakrivenu el petach ohel moed yakriv oto lirtzon lifnei Adonai. Translated is, if his offering shall be a burnt offering of the herd. Im ola, if his raising up, if the raising up, here it's not identified as his actually. Im ola karbano, if the raising up of his closening is from the cattle. But this cattle word, bakar, is a permutation of his korban. Does everyone see that? The cattle word, bet koof-resh, is a permutation of the Koof-resh-bet, korban. I mean, this is poetry, and in the English, like many translations, it would be lost. Im ola karbano min habakar. And then it goes on to say, male without blemish, but over and over again, yakriv, you will bring it close. He will bring it close. Bring it close. Even just this translation that says, he shall bring it to the door. I don't know which translations you're all looking at, but mine, he shall bring it to the door of the tent of meeting. He shall bring it close to the opening of the tent of witnessing. Bringing close feels a lot different than just bringing. And in fact, I think I wrote on my graphic the word intimate. Yeah. Because krav in Hebrew is also a battle. Now, this is not even a permutation. A krav is a battle. You know, close is close, intimate is intimate. We're not differentiating necessarily between the pleasant and the aggressive. In this root, that's what I want to point out. That I'm saying lies in this root and how it is used in the ancient text. A krav is a battle, and a korban is what I bring, how I come close, what I bring close in this most holy of, right now we're in the Holy of Holies because it's the holiest, it's the tent of witnessing. It is the place where this wandering tribe is doing its ritual.
Would you say more about the battle? Are you saying that it's a form of being close is to be locked in battle? We spend all this time thinking about.
If I'm remembering accurately, so I would have to look at the krav more in Torah to say for sure what I'm about to say. But from the little I'm remembering, these were battles that were small. They intimate battles, right? These were now I'm not remembering any verses off the top of my head, so I have to go back and check, and maybe I'll email you all once I do. But a krav was like a wrestling match, is how I remember. Dad's nodding. Okay, that's affirming. It's how I remember, but I can't quote you quotes right now. Go ahead.
The Israeli form of martial arts is called krav maga. It's krav like a type of wrestling match.
Maga means touch,
Yeah.
close touch. Krav Maga, and that is the form of martial art. Yep. So that is how I remember krav being found in the Torah, but I can't quote verses. I would always sit there in front of Gershon, if you don't all know Reb Gershon Winkler, and he had all these brilliant insights that I felt really resonant with, but he could quote the verses over and over again. Like his brain's like an encyclopedia, and I just get leftover impressions unless I, make these worksheets. So I can't remember right now, but that's the impression I got of krav. We can look into it further. So that was our olah, our up offering, our giving up, and people say that, can you just give up? Right? And giving up this is to use the English, because giving up can feel like a lack of, but it can also feel like I offer it to you. My friend Meredith, I'll bring her in, since we're talking about people who have changed worlds so lovingly. Meredith used to say, when I would have a problem I was wrestling with, talk about krav, she would say, Keren, have you turned it over? Have you turned it over to the Infinite One, to Adonai? Have you turned it over? Have you given up? Have you given it up? Right? Not given up like, oh, it's in the trash now or it's down the drain. But if you give something up to allow heaven, to use some colloquial phrases, to allow heaven to take care of it. So that's how I see the olah. Allow heaven to take care of it. The second one down, nun chet nach, laniach, noach, who's here with us today. Noach is to place down comfortably, is how I'm saying it, because all of those words are in the root. Well, to place down or to place oneself down, if it's not been conjugated, it could go, in any way. You can lanuach, you can rest, or you can lahaniach, give someone else to rest. But it's down, the direction is down. And so Leviticus chapter 2:1, V'nefesh ki takriv karban mincha. And when a soul, it's not Adam this time. This is incredible how they set this up, and we usually miss it. First, we were on the Adam brings close, the closening. Now we're on nefesh brings close, the closening. Mincha, it goes down. Ladonai.
I'm
Okay,
sorry, where are you?
Leviticus 2:1, chapter 2, verse 1. We're right at the second offering, second chapter. V'nefesh ki takriv korban mincha ladonai. When a soul comes close to do the closening, ladonai. Now, undeniably, the next word is solet, referring to fine grain, refined grain. Okay, so I'm not saying that the grain's not here, but I am saying there's something deeper that we can resource when we live without the temple, if we care to. Solet ye korbano, that will be his closening. Vayitzak alea shemen v'natan alea levona, shemen, oil, and frankincense on it. Now, the commentary in Eitz Chaim does have a clue. Made from the choice part of wheat taken from the inner kernels. So solet, semolina, taken from the inner kernels. And what did we just say? When a nefesh comes. We just said the inner aspect of a human being is the mincha offering. Solet, the inner part of the kernel. So even though very likely we're just talking about wheat here, don't get too esoteric, Keren, it still is very particularly the inner kernel. And it's very specifically was the Adam and now it's the nefesh. That really struck me. I was like, oh, there's something rich here. And so that was what led me to make this chart, which I'll just refer to briefly because we're already very close to wrapping up. But that's why I made this chart, because the Olah comes from the Adam, the Nach comes from the Nefesh, and the Shlamim then comes from anybody much more anonymously. So I'll just refer to the chart so you know how to use it if you go from here in your own studies. There's something very particular when they first tell us about the Olah, the up offering, the giving up. Adam does that. Then the Mincha offering, giving down. Give up, give down, is the nefesh. The nefesh is the one that closens itself this way. Now this is, again, this is just in the text. And here's a little more context for why I'm kooky with this stuff. I see you all not seeing me as kooky, but since we're also videotaping for others, well, maybe there's one person here who does see me as kooky, but there's a long history there. But because other people watch this, when I say it's right there in the text, I stand for, my Source Kabala stands for, no, you guys don't gloss that over. Do you see? That's the kooky part, is I'm not letting it slip by. I cannot be the one that claims that this should be a yoga practice. I like to make it a yoga practice. I'm not saying it should be, but I am saying, wait, whoa, hold on. We can't let this slip by, this closening thing, because it's all over the place. And first it was an Adam, and then it's a Nefesh, and then we get to the Shlamim. after the earthling, the basar of the human being, the meat of the human being, the bakar of our herd, the cattle. Then the nefesh, we're at the second offering of the mincha, Leviticus chapter 2. Then the nefesh brings close and brings the inner kernel of the wheat, just before the third type of offering. Okay, those were our first two. Just before the third type of offering, which is Leviticus chapter 3, verse 1. Vayikra Gimel. Okay, on the bottom of page 3 of my pages for you. Now it doesn't say if it's an Adam or a Nefesh. It's just im zevach shlamim. If the, I don't want to translate zevach. It's the same root as the altar, mizbeach. So I don't want to just call it an offering, but let's not go there. We'll call it an offering for now. But the offering of shlamim, the offering of wholeness, peace. And often they will translate it as peace offering. But it's missing the aspect of wholeness, because now that we already gave up and gave down, and you see worship practices like this all over the indigenous world and modern world, if we have chosen, right? When we see up, down, this is for the sake of that completion, that sake of that sense of shalem, complete. It's a giving up, giving down, and now I am complete. So still, same place, Leviticus 3:1. Ve'im zevach shlamim karbano. So I could say, and if the zevach shlamim is the way of drawing close for him or her, im mina bakar hu makriv, he could bring from the cattle, closening, zachar nekeva, masculine, feminine, pure, tamim, yakrivenu lifnei Adonai, drawing close into the presence of Adonai. So the Chumash says about this category of offering, the shalem offering, the shlamim offering, was brought by a person who had something to celebrate. Hoffman, I'm just repeating in the quote, I'm not sure which Hoffman they're referring to, but it's in the Eitz Chaim Chumash if you want to go look and find out. Hoffman emphasizes that Zevach Shlamim is always an individual, never communal offering. It is called Shlamim because it is motivated not by guilt or obligation, but by a sense of wholeness in the donor's life. So what this one commentator is saying is that the wholeness in the donor's life moved them to make this Shalem offering. Remember, the first two were give up, give down, give up, give down. The third, Shalem. And one would come not from, I'm just adding the commentary of this guy or woman, not from a place of guilt or request or obligation, but by a sense of everything is already whole. A sense of wholeness in the donor's life, a sense of being at peace with one's family, with the priest, the temple, and with God. And that does refer to what I did in my graphic of all around, right? Up, down, give up, give down, and then the wholeness, the all around. And the commentator is resonating with what I said by saying a sense of peace in life, with family, with community, with God. Circles within circles, wholeness. Questions or comments?
I have a couple, Karen. This is sorry for being a bit late. I hope to see the recording, but I have two for Zachar. Is I know that's also to remember. Is there any correlation between the two? And also krav, does that relate to Israel? is that the same root with Ra, wrestles with God? Is that where this comes from, or is that a
No.
different?
Yishar El, which is also an interesting one. We could do, I should make notes after this for other classes we could do. Yishar El, that's a root, Yud, Shin, Resh, which also means straight. So I actually read it as aligned with God when I read it. Others have said wrestles, and they're not wrong. But when we have an ancient, I'm banging on my microphone, when we have an ancient language, a primitive language to house the sacred, I claim, Yud Shin Resh, if it does mean both wrestle and align, then we have to remember both when we translate. And I say this with such emphasis because there are other roots where they say, well, it means this here and it means that there. And in the concordance, well, in this place it means that, and in this place it means that. And I always yell back at my concordance, you guys can't do that. So to just a brief mention of Yishar, no, it's not krav, but it is also an interesting root because it also means line, straight line or honest. So it has its whole own depth. And zachar and masculine, I'll say the same thing. You cannot say, no, it means remember here and it means masculine there. So we have to look. We have to look in the concordance in every place that root came up. And I don't believe I have methodically at all yet. You look every place it comes up and you look at the context. And then we can understand how those things connect. I just always think of it of the guys have better memory. Like I said about Gershon, that's how I think. But I'm sure that's still a superficial understanding.
I'm so feeling the feminine approach being the, well, I'm thinking a Rav Kook, I'm thinking cookie, that we're being called
Thanks.
cookie. Maybe we're the incoming vehicle of the challenging ways of relooking at everything. A few weeks ago, there was a concert on Sunday, mostly women, some men, called Her Holy Names. And it was 2 hours of people sharing their story of 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years of tracking a path within Judaism that was not recognized through their training. And I was reminded of it with the word burial and grave, because there was so much about their realization of the Shekhinah coming about through a death or through some kind of falling down, a deep depression or a huge loss, and giving over to dive deep into that, and then having that lead to a whole new way of understanding.
I think that's a beautiful way, because we went through the permutations but didn't really contemplate on them together, just for sake of time. In a 3-hour workshop I would, but that's a beautiful way of bringing in kever, a permutation of karov, only one flip in the letters, kever, karov, this closening, and how burial. Now let's say we're even burying not a person, let's say we're burying a letter we wrote, or any kind of ritual of placing something safely in the earth that we're ready to give up in its form. I think there's lots of ways to, and you just enunciated a beautiful one, that this is drawing close. Giving up something in form, we all know from life experience, can, if we take the opportunity, be a drawing close to the divine, the formless. Because we can feel so empty that vacuum just can, if we take the opportunity, just suck in spirit to our lives. I think that's a beautiful relation. Go ahead. And then
I was trying to do a
finish up.
Hamas type acrostic with the word grief. And what I got was taking the first letter of each of these words, gracious relief from identifying with eternity forgetting, GRIEF, gracious relief from identifying with eternity forgetfulness. It was taking the grief and going different permutation.
Lovely. I hope you'll go ahead, Saba, if you want to say something.
Well, yeah, I did want to make comment about this this idea of animal sacrifice. I'm using the English word sacrifice to mean korban, which was practiced in the temple. And there's no doubt in the most traditional of our Jewish practices today, focus on restoring that practice as much as possible. But other forms of Judaism today that are not as traditional as that have gotten away from that. And in fact, in the most recent conservative prayer books, there are alternative paragraphs which can be recited, which do not yearn for animal sacrifice, and they can be recited in place of those more traditional paragraphs which do. My own reading of history is that God has told us 3 times in no uncertain terms, I don't want you sacrificing animals to me anymore. 3 times. The first time was the destruction of the first temple by the Babylonians in 586 BCE. That didn't take, because a few generations later, the Jews that had been deported from Israel to Babylon were now coming back and rebuilding the temple, so that in Solomon's time, it was built a second time and then destroyed again by the Romans in 70. That was the second warning that God is sending us. And now the third warning is we have the Dome of the Rock built on top of the temple site. And if the Israelites ever tried to remove that and rebuild the temple, you can bet there would be a holy war between the Israelites and Islam, be it between Israel and Islam. 3 times, no uncertain terms. God is telling us, I don't want you sacrificing animals to me anymore.
So, and you're recalling this as your reading of history. So this is your understanding that you probably shared with others, but yeah.
Yes, that's my understanding.
That sounds like a giving up. It sounds like a reverence. I hear you. It sounds like that way of, okay, I'll give this up. You're showing me.
Yeah, and in fact, there's a statement in the Talmud. I forget which 2 rabbis were involved. Shortly after the destruction of the Second Temple, one of the rabbis is saying to the other, "What are we going to do now? We don't have the temple to practice our sacrifices anymore." And the other rabbi says to him, "We can substitute for the sacrifices prayer and doing good deeds to others. That will be the substitute."
Right. And that must be the one that I read, actually, that brought me closer to this closening revelation, because I would add, Rabbi Keren would add, prayer and good deeds and gesture. Some embodied practice. I really don't care if it's yoga, but an embodied practice, because for me and for my teaching, for my life and for my teaching, I think that the embodied practice was there. I would not sacrifice an animal if I were asked to right now, for many different reasons. So I'm with you on, I don't need this to be redone, but the embodied and sensuous, and my ability to prostrate myself on the ground or throw my hands up in the air, feels essential to me as a human being, but also in the way I teach people, it feels essential to not, let me see if I can define embodied without being as abstract as it is. To be, like you said in one of the last lessons about direct sense, to work from your senses directly, you know, to have some experience of this thing. And so I would add exactly that, through prayer, through good deeds, righteous action, and may we also replace that with something of what the native Hebrew wisdom knew. Kavod Adonai is there. The glory of this mysterious, ineffable power is there, and I bring myself close to it. This is something that Keren doesn't want to lose in the loss of the temple and the sacrifices.
Rabbi Diane
One
Elliott.
more quick comment so we can complete, but please do go.
Well, just Rabbi Diane Elliott gave a whole course, a 2.5-hour section just on prostration and what happens when we start dropping the head and the cranium touches, the brain touches different parts of the cranium, and what happens when the lungs fall into a different place in the chest cavity, and what happens to the heart and how it affects the belly, the internal, looking at the internal stimulation of different nerves.
Mm-hmm.
It's a huge exploration of great interest for me.
I would think that would be interesting, and I do want to take from there something more rudimentary, but the same thing. Even if we just think about the humility of a prostration, the humility of someone being able to put their head on the dirt like Moses did so many times, I think it's a missing piece for people to be human, a piece of our humanity. And I do see that the native Hebrew spirituality knew this. To sum up and actually bring us closer towards the next offering, the next korban that I'm bringing you all and the rest of the world that wants to join on Zoom, the native Hebrew spirituality. So my Abba just referred very accurately to this Talmudic discussion about will replace. So my teachers helped me understand this notion that could be arguable, of course, of a backpackable religion. So I call it condensing. Condensing, okay, mitzvah has stayed, but condensing to words of prayer, and not only words of prayer, generally prescribed words of prayer, was a condensation of the spirit, backpackable for being on the run or being strangers in foreign lands. So I often say, and I think my website says, part of my charge is to unpack what was condensed, right? Don't dismiss it, don't call it wrong, none of that, just what happens when we unpack. And I do think this teaching about the korban and the gesture, having some experience of korban for us today would be my prayer for unpacking what was packed up so tightly.
Well, you know how in your little thesis that you did way back when,
For ordination.
yeah, you used to do what I call walking meditation, but it's sort of a walking prayer, combining your esoteric being and sensory together and embodying it, or being alive in it in your body. And I know most of my teenage years, that's what I used to do. Is I would get up in the morning and I would just offer myself to the world. Then I would go out on these long marches before I had to go to work or whatever, and I would just have the most awe-consuming experiences out in nature. You know, real, true communals.
I want to use that note to allow us to
Mhm.
wrap up, and thank you all who could stay over time. I want to take what Lisa said and make it a wrap, but just checking that, does anyone else have words that feel important to share before you feel complete? Okay, so the wrap with Lisa is yes, this offering myself in the awe-inspiring experience. So it is my perception that the native Hebrew spirituality lived like that. That was a lifestyle. And it's also my perception that Judaism condensed into an ism, which, like you saw from my promotion for the next series, Judaism is not a word that exists in Torah. Neither is the word religion. So there was a lifestyle of spirituality that I believe had that, what you just referenced, your direct experience as a teenager, and that it's valuable. I believe it's valuable to remember, and not just remember in words. Thank you all for that extra bit of time. I apologize that it feels very kind of quick to depart now, but that is how it is. So I hope you all go well with the material and your contemplations, and I welcome any emails of what you see or want to be heard seeing. Feel free to send email follow-ups. Thank you, Lasita.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Laila Tov.
Go well. Assalamu alaikum. Laila tov.